Yes, the relay on YouTube. Check it out. Lots of stories about me on there. All the boxing facts and info that you want in a very entertaining, educational manner. The relay. Check it out on YouTube.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Jessica McCaskill versus Alma Ibarra. Let's talk about this. You know, in my prediction video, I decided to go with the undisputed welterweight champion to retain her titles in this match by way of a points decision. I figured that because Jessica is a smaller target than Alma Ibarra is used to, she would be able to slip, slide, roll, and ride,
work around Alma Ibarra's punches.
That because Jessica is a smaller target, a much smaller target than Alma Ibarra is used to, and because Alma is so much taller than Jessica, she might sacrifice some of that height trying to land shots, trying to land punches, and that would put her within striking distance of Jessica's looping right.
My prediction was that Jessica would win a points decision. I didn't figure that she'd stop Alma.
And that's what she did in just 3 rounds. In 3 rounds, she broke Alma Ibarra's spirit.
I picked Jessica to win, but I didn't anticipate that she would be this dominant.
Let alone that she'd stop a bigger, younger fighter with many physical advantages so easily, so quickly, that she would beat Alma Ibarra into submission easier than she beat Candy Wyatt before her.
The method behind the madness.
Rest assured, there is one. You often hear the critics say that Jessica McCaskill is lacking form, that fundamentally she's not a sound fighter, but there is a method to her madness, and it's that method that makes her a handful, makes her hard to deal with, coming in hard and fast.
Crowding the girl opposite the ring.
It was my contention ahead of the fight that Alma Ibarra wouldn't be able to keep Jessica McCaskill off of her. She wouldn't be able to keep her out. She wouldn't be able to manage the distance, and that's what we saw for all of 3 rounds.
Just 3 rounds.
Jessica McCaskill shot out of her corner like a bat out of hell, and she didn't break character. Like most pressure fighters, she stayed in character.
That's what pressure fighters do. They stay in character and they apply pressure.
Almost immediately, Jessica McCaskill closed the gap and seized control of the distance at which the fight was being fought, as most of the fight was being fought on Jessica McCaskill's terms,
which rendered Alma Ibarra defenseless and flustered,
absorbing several big right hands, looping right hands over the top. In just the first round, the opening round, I saw Jessica McCaskill connect with a pretty good uppercut as well.
She broke Alma's spirit.
She hit Alma so hard and so fast with so much.
Alma felt like a deer in the headlights. She really didn't know what to do. She resorted to clinching and wrestling.
She couldn't manage the distance. She couldn't keep Jessica McCaskill out, and she couldn't contend with her mid-range to inside.
All she could do was tie Jessica up.
3 rounds and several looping right hands later that staggered Alma Ibarra, she retired in her corner. She didn't want to come out for the 4th round.
That really took me by surprise because this was the biggest fight of Alma's career.
Far be it for me to chastise a professional boxer, risking it all in there inside the squared circle, but I wasn't expecting Alma to quit, and that's what she did.
She quit. Rationalize it however you like.
After 3 rounds of being assailed by Jessica McCaskill's looping rights and hooks to the body, 1 or 2 uppercuts here and there,
left hooks,
Alma Ibarra decided she didn't want to come out of her corner for the 4th round. What makes Jessica McCaskill so hard to deal with is she's awkward. She's unconventional.
She's not fighting a fight on the other girl's terms.
She's forcing the girl opposite the ring to fight on hers. Jessica McCaskill's base style can be described as being very uncooperative, as it seldom does the girl opposite the ring any favors.
Retiring in her corner like that in what was the biggest fight of her career, I think that's going to stay with Alma Ibarra.
I think it's going to stay with her for a long time, and I think it's going to haunt her, as she was on the precipice of greatness, the biggest fight of her career. Everything was on the other side of a Jessica McCaskill fight for Alma Ibarra, and she chose not to come out.
She didn't want to come out for the 4th round.
And I can only tell you what I think. And if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, Alma quit. Whether it was out of sheer frustration or simply being beaten into submission.
Frustration that she couldn't manage the distance to keep Jessica out.
Frustration that she couldn't keep at a boxing match, or fear of where the fight was going
and what was about to happen.
She retired in her corner. She didn't want to come out, though the direction that this fight was headed, we were heading towards a knockout is what we were heading towards.
And so Jessica McCaskill successfully defends the undisputed welterweight crown for the third time in her career.
Having successfully retained the belts against Cecilia Brækhus, the former undisputed welterweight champion, in their rematch. Having successfully defended it against Australia's own Candy Wyatt, more recently last night against Mexico's own Alma Ibarra, Jessica McCaskill and Rick Ramos have made it crystal clear they are leaving the welterweight division.
They're leaving the division on a high. They mean to move downstairs to 140.
Jessica McCaskill is set to leave the welterweight division on her own terms, the same way she fought last night's fight on her own terms.
Congratulations to her
for successfully defending her undisputed crown yet again. We then come to the super bantamweight title fight between the reigning champion MJ Akhmadaliev and Ronnie Rios, the challenger, the mandatory challenger.
MJ doesn't have the most eye-catching style,
though he is a solid fighter all around.
There really isn't any one thing about MJ that jumps out at you, jumps out from the screen.
Though he is a solid fighter all around.
My previous segment in reference to the McCaskill versus Ibarra fight, we talked about being able to manage the distance.
Being able to manage the distance against an aggressive opponent that means to close the gap and get mid-range to inside. Well, MJ Akhmadaliev was able to manage the distance with his fancy feet, which don't really jump out at the screen at you the same way that, say, Loma's footwork does, or Bam Rodriguez, who we're going to talk about a little later.
But MJ Akhmadaliev won this fight with his feet.
It's the little things, the things you may not pick up on as you're watching the fight in real time, how MJ Akhmadaliev takes a half step back in order to walk Ronnie Rios into shots. Ronnie Rios is a characteristic mid-range to inside fighter. He's tall for the weight, but he usually gives up that height to get off hooks, body shots.
MJ Akhmadaliev managed the distance effectively by giving up a bit of ground when necessary.
Though never being outworked, he'd give up a bit of ground and shoot the jab, continue to control the distance at which the fight is being fought, attempting to walk Ronnie Rios into shots, and many times that's exactly what he did. MJ, the southpaw, leading with that southpaw jab, that right hand.
As opposed to Ronnie, who's an orthodox fighter.
As stated, no one thing about MJ jumps out at the screen.
Nothing in particular jumps out at the screen at you when it comes to MJ.
But he does a lot of things well, a lot of small things. He's got very good feet. I think that's his strongest attribute as a fighter, his movement, his footwork. He's got a good work rate.
Good variety of punches.
Straight punches, looping shots, body shots, uppercuts. He shows you a little bit of everything in terms of his arsenal.
You can't accuse MJ Akhmadaliev of being a headhunter.
He does a little bit of everything. Headshots, body shots, very good sequences and very good salvos in this fight. And in moments where Ronnie Rios was
closing in,
attempting to close the gap and apply pressure on MJ Akhmadaliev, we saw very good...
MJ's got very good ring savvy.
Situational awareness, good ring savvy, as MJ would spin off those ropes.
Those fancy feet.
The best way to describe MJ is a jack of all trades. He's not the fastest guy, though he does have speed. Perhaps he doesn't have the most eye-catching footwork, but he does have fancy feet.
Yeah.
He's not the strongest puncher, but he has a respectable punch.
Don't let him hit you clean.
And he's versatile.
Yeah.
He's not limited to boxing from just one range. Not just the outside, not just mid-range to inside. He can do a little bit of everything at varying ranges.
He can work mid-range to outside or mid-range to inside.
Managed the distance so well against Ronnie Rios. It escaped me that he was fighting one-handed, that apparently he hurt his left hand at some point early in the fight.
Initially, when I was watching the broadcast, I hadn't even noticed.
I usually watch these matches with the volume on mute as to not be swayed by the commentary team.
Not be influenced by their perception of the match and their perception of the action.
This was better from MJ than what we saw the last time out with Jose Velasquez. He looked lackluster with Jose to me, less than spectacular. A particularly awkward situation looking back because there aren't many super bantamweights that are smaller than MJ Akhmadaliev, to whereas MJ's the bigger guy in the ring. More often than not, MJ, a moderately sized super bantamweight. He's usually
the pocket-sized guy in the ring.
He's usually the smaller man, whereas against Jose Velasquez, he found himself so confronted with an even more pocket-sized guy than he is. Though last night, against Ronnie Rios, that was a more solid performance, a more solid showing against a somewhat bigger guy.
In the 12th, he unleashed a salvo of punches, head punches, body punches.
As Ronnie Rios attempted to weather the storm behind that high guard, MJ Akhmadaliev wanted to finish, and finish strong. He wanted to close the show, and he did just that as he stopped Ronnie Rios.
Hooks that sailed around the guard.
Punches that pierced through it. Body shots. He emptied the tank on Ronnie. He wanted to finish strong in San Antonio, and he did just that. I may have to reevaluate my original assessment of a potential Akhmadaliev versus Fulton fight based on this performance because I feel like MJ...
He made me a believer with this one.
Akhmadaliev versus Fulton really is the only fight to make at 122 pounds. Stephen Fulton, who was taking in the action, took to his social media post-fight and stated, "Man, let's make the fight happen." To which Eddie Hearn replied, 100%, no obstacles. Let's make it happen.
In terms of a conversation, that's the most I've heard in reference to this fight.
I've seen more conversations in reference to a potential Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue fight than a Stephen Fulton versus MJ Akhmadaliev fight. It has seemed like the desire to get such a fight over the line has been mostly one-sided, one-way traffic. On several occasions, we've heard Stephen state that he wants that undisputed title fight, though what is actually being done to bring it into fruition? Stephen Fulton being a PBC guy, MJ being a matchroom fighter. As much as I'd like to see this fight come into fruition, you have to question whether or not it will, because somebody's going to have to cross the street.
I'll be honest, I'm not getting my hopes up.
At a time when most American-based promoters like Lou DiBella, Bob Arum, some of the people over there at the PBC are rallying against Eddie Hearn and the DAZN platform, the idea that one among them would send their unbeaten fighter, their unbeaten unified champion to the DAZN platform
Seems far-fetched.
What are we really expecting? Are we really expecting a PBC fighter to cross over to the Matchroom and DAZN side of things for a fight? I mean, offers have gone out to fighters like Jermall Charlo and Gervonta Davis, fighters like Luis Ortiz and Adam Kovnowski, and no dice.
No luck. Nobody from that side of the street crosses over.
It doesn't happen. And because it doesn't happen, I'd sooner expect to see Stephen Fulton later on this year in the ring with Luis Nery than I'm expecting to see him in the ring with MJ Akhmadaliev for what would be the undisputed super bantamweight championship of the world. I'm not hopeful.
So pardon my pessimism.
How many times have we seen two guys go back and forth on social media just so that a fucking fight doesn't happen? I'll tell you what I think. MJ Akhmadaliev's knockout, Ronnie Rios, last night, leaves me feeling so inclined to perhaps reevaluate how I view a fight between him and Stephen Fulton. Perhaps I haven't been giving MJ enough credit, but he really looked solid last night, really looked capable. Though it might be much ado about nothing because I'm not convinced a fight between them is going to happen anyway. We then come to the main event of that same card, the statement win, the statement victory, statement knockout.
I mean, do you realize that ahead of this fight, Rungvisai hadn't been stopped since 2009?
13 years ago, in 2009, in what were Rungvisai's first two professional fights as a professional boxer. Ahead of this fight, Rungvisai, he hadn't been stopped in a long time, and it wasn't for lack of trying, as he's swapped punches with some of the best and brightest fighters at this weight. Jesse Rodriguez.
He's just beaten 2 of the 4 kings at super flyweight.
2 of the 4. You know who they are. Rungvisai, Carlos Cuadras, Juan Francisco Estrada, and Chocolatito, Roman Gonzalez. You could argue that Kazuto Ioka might have more of a claim towards being one of the 4 kings than Carlos Cuadras, though all the same, these are statement wins, statement victories.
You know that Bam only has 16 pro fights?
22 years old, having only fought for 12 rounds once, and that was in his last fight. This was
his 16th professional bout. This kid ain't even got 20 fights.
Recording his second win over 2 of the 4 kings at super flyweight.
My prediction was that Bam Rodriguez would outmaneuver Rungvisai.
That's what sold it for me. You often hear it said that power is the last thing to go, and Rungvisai, in many ways, is the biggest power puncher in today's super flyweight division. He is. He packs a big punch, and you saw that in this fight. Power really is the last thing to go, but a fighter's legs are the first. And I was mindful that Rungvisai, big puncher that he might be, he's no spring chicken, and he's not getting any younger, whereas the movement and footwork, the pivots and shifts from Bam Rodriguez would allow him to cut angles that would make it difficult for Sor to deliver his power.
Deliver his power punches.
What won Bam Rodriguez this fight was his feet. Not just his accuracy, not just his speed, not just his combinations, but his feet, his angles.
They're both southpaws, so neither of them have that advantage.
You'll notice that Rungvisai plants his feet a lot more than Bam Rodriguez does. Bam Rodriguez is a fighter who fights with a pep in his step, often turning the other guy and getting to the side of him to get around his guard.
Snake punches in there.
Because they're super flyweights, both guys throw throw a lot of punches, don't misunderstand me, but one guy really is more of a combination puncher than the other, and that's Bam Rodriguez, whereas Sor, because he plants his feet and sits on his shots...
Well, that's what power punchers do.
They draw power from the ground up. One look at Sor Rungvisai's calf muscles and you can see where the power comes from, though it is a trade-off. If you're planting your feet and sitting on your shots, you're not going to be as light on your feet as someone else.
Somebody like Bam.
Really was going to work and going to town on Sor Rungvisai, piling up the damage. Sor Rungvisai, who did some of the right things. He did some of the things you need to do against a moving target like Bam Rodriguez, who can cut angles rather quickly. You notice the conscious effort from Sor to sneak in body shots, but the defenses of Bam Rodriguez, they held up. As those shots landed on his arms, his gloves, his elbows, he kept those elbows pinned, kept those elbows tucked, as Sor Rungvisai made a conscious effort to try and go to Bam's body to slow him down, and
no dice.
No dice and no luck in that department. It was my contention ahead of this fight, my prediction that between Bam Rodriguez's fancy feet, the angles that he cuts, and the fact that they're both southpaws, that neither man would have that advantage.
Bam would still be a lot faster than Sor, and he'd be able to beat him to the punch.
That's what he did, though he exceeded my expectations because I wasn't quite sure if Bam Rodriguez packs a big enough punch that he could potentially stop Sor Rungvisai. And what I saw last night is he piled up enough damage consistently.
It wasn't any one shot that hurt Sor Rungvisai.
Because throughout the course of this fight, he took a lot of shots, took a lot of punches. It wasn't any one singular moment.
Any one singular punch, rather the accumulation of punches, the accumulation of damage.
He's got a great poker face, by the way. You'd never know it to look straight at him, but he was hurt several times in this fight, and it wasn't written on his face so much as his body language.
That was the tell for me. That's how I knew that Bam Rodriguez was getting to Sor.
Although ahead of this fight, my prediction was that Bam Rodriguez would outpoint Sor Rungvisai, and he exceeded my expectations, as Bam Rodriguez really is one of the best and brightest fighters, not just in today's super flyweight division, but in the sport. In the sport of boxing, this kid only has 16 professional fights. He's only ever been 12 rounds once, and he's only 22 years old.
He's already being heralded as a pound-for-pound fighter in his own respect.
And I get it, I do, though I don't rank him as such, not yet. I'm not a slave to the moment, as some others, though Bam Rodriguez really is a fighter who's on his way, and if I'm being honest, he's just one win away from cracking the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list.
The sky's the limit for Bam Rodriguez.
Who scored an 8th-round technical knockout over Sor Rungvisai, who I wasn't even sure could be stopped.
I remember when Eddie Hearn first came to America and people said that he'd never be able to sign American talent, American stars.
Top-tier, top-shelf talent from the American talent pool. And we see how those comments have aged, now haven't we? Because Bam Rodriguez is one of Matchroom's brightest young stars.
He's one of the brightest young stars in the whole sport right now.
How do you like them apples? Congratulations to Bam Rodriguez for advancing to a professional record of 16 wins, no losses, and no draws, and doing it in style.